Welcome to the Intuitive Rising podcast. I'm your host, Amy Brooks. This is a podcast that invites you to remember who you are, return to yourself, and rise into your highest and best soul self. Every week, I will be sharing inspiring conversations about topics that hold keys to your awakening. My mission as an international evidential psychic medium, Reiki practitioner, and intuitive mentor is to help you rise into who you were born to be. Enjoy the show. Hello. Welcome back. I am so glad to see you. Energetically, I see you. I feel you. I know you. What are you guys up to, and how is your March going so far? There's been a few things going on as of late with me. I've had 2 birthdays, my children, my oldest and my youngest. We like to call them the bookends. We're born 10 years apart, almost to the day. So we had a birthday a couple days ago and a birthday yesterday. And I was reflecting a little bit on how time flies. I'm now the parent of an adult child. My daughter turned 18 yesterday. It's just been a wild ride. And yeah, there's a feeling of excitement. There's also a feeling of anticipation. There's a feeling of time kind of flying, and a little bit of a feeling of pressure I feel internally, just because there's so much going on with me lately, and there's so many changes in our own lives as of late. We've got a lot of things moving and shaking, but that's not really what I'm here to talk to you about. I'm here to share some client spirit stories. I know when I talk about spirit stories, people become very, very engaged. Now, I don't check every week like how many downloads or listens each episode has, because that would seriously do my head in. I don't want to know. I truly want to record because I enjoy it, and knowing that when I tap into something I enjoy and align with, that others respond to that. So it's not so much about numbers. However, on my social media, I have witnessed and saw that when I make content and post sharing spirit stories, whether they are my own personal ones or whether they are from information and evidence that has come through in a client's session, people seem to love them. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. And I wrote a note the other day, and it's something I just kind of want to talk about. I received a message from someone that had a reading. This was maybe a week or so ago, and they, kind of were giving me feedback that when they watched back the recording of their reading, they were able to pick up on things that they had not picked up on or fully absorbed and received during the reading. And so they're like, oh my goodness, like now that I'm listening back, like even more is hitting, even more is resonating, and even more makes sense. And, we were kind of talking back and forth about how we can set our intentions about what we would like to receive. I always ask you, my clients, I always ask for you to set your intentions before you have a session with me. What is it that you're hoping comes up? Where do you need that guidance in your life for doing mediumship? What person are you specifically most wanting to hear from? And I don't want to know that information. I just want you to set those intentions. And then my responsibility as the medium is that I set my own intentions. And that is, well, you know what? Let's just talk about them a little bit. Let me give you an example of something that I would do, specifically that I would say before I met with a client for a virtual session. So, say I'm doing a session. I'm about to do a session for you. Come down to my desk, turn on my computer, open up Zoom, and I'm sitting here and I'm just waiting, for the meeting to start. I would take some really deep belly breaths. So let's do that together. If you can, if you're in a space that you can, okay. And then what I would do is I would say, "Hi, Spirit. I'm here today to connect for my client." I'm just going to make a name up. First one that comes to my head, Jessica. I'm here today to connect to Jessica. Jessica is here to connect with her loved ones in spirit. And then I will say, anyone that Jessica most needs to hear from and or has set her intention to connect to today, I ask that you come through on your own. Please come through and identify yourself in a way that feels right for you, knowing that Jessica will be able to perceive it, whether that be a name, a physical description, memories, whatever it is that however you want to describe yourself. I ask that loved ones in spirit come through one at a time, please. And I ask that you speak slowly to me. I ask that all information that comes through is in Jessica's highest and best good. I trust that you will give that information to us in a way that Jessica is able to understand it and receive it so that she can move forward with a sense of comfort, peace, and healing in her life. I ask that you guide Jessica today and bring forward any sort of information, guidance, evidence, words of healing that will help Jessica on her journey forward. I ask that you bring forward some memories that you shared together, any funny little inside jokes you would like to share. It'd be nice if you could bring through something that you've witnessed in Jessica's life since you've transitioned to the spirit world, so that Jessica can feel more confident in the knowledge that you are still guiding her. You are still witnessing her life. Please help make this connection between Jessica and myself as her medium to flow and to feel aligned and to feel mutually beneficial. I want us both to feel uplifted and connected and safe. Thank you, Spirit. And that is just kind of some of those things I say all the time, like with every client. Some of those things came in specifically. I just got like very, very lightheaded as soon as I opened my eyes and I finished that. So I don't know if I would if there's a listener named Jessica, I might have invited your loved ones to me. But yeah, like that's what I would do. And then I'd open my eyes and then I would click join, and then I would let you into the room and we would proceed. And that's what I do. And that's how I set my intention. And that's my responsibility as a medium. And that's it. That's it. That's my responsibility. I make sure that I feel well. And so long as I can do everything in my power to do so by receiving a good amount of sleep, hopefully, by being hydrated. Water is a conduit. So the more hydrated we are, the easier sometimes it feels like information can flow. So I always have a water bottle with me because A, dry mouth if I'm talking so long, and B, because I really feel like it's a conduit. I really feel like it helps information come through to some degree. Yeah, but all this to say, I really want clients, and so far the spirit world has done an amazing job because I have never had an experience with a client that was, well, there's been one, and I wouldn't say it was negative, but I've had one like less than aligned connection in the 5 years that I've been doing this, which is an amazing, amazing feat in itself, I feel. And I really, truly believe that is because I've set my intentions to the spirit world that I will do this work with the best intentions and, for my clients' healing. And I want the spirit world to bring those people to me. Like, I'm not going to run around selling myself to anyone. I will openly share myself in terms of, giving information via content, via social media stories, via my podcast. But, other than that, I will wait for spirit to connect me with the right people. And that has worked every single time. And something, my aligned client, if we were to talk about what's your aligned client, my aligned client would trust that the messages that come through are exactly what needs to come through. I've had experiences with clients where they'll book that first initial reading with me, and it's our first experience together. And, it will like blow their socks off. I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm thinking of a specific client who took a chance after reading some Google reviews and booked a session with me. And in her words, her socks were blown off, right? Because so many specific things came through and it was all so relevant for her. And it was organic, right? As I like it to be. I set my intention as I did. You set your intention about what you need to hear about, or maybe your intention is just, I'm an open book and whatever happens, happens. Knowing that you're safe and you're safe with me, right? That's part of my intention, right? That's my ideal client, is somebody that feels safe with me. And, but I know that has to be earned. So I just ask that someone be open, and then that connection and that trust is built throughout that session, that initial session. And so, that was the experience that they had. And then the next reading they booked, which was a few months later, it was a different kind of session, but they came in with like a list of questions. And I'm very clear to say, hey, like, I like to begin a session organically, right? But after that, we can take some questions. This person really wanted me to spend the time, their session, to answer these questions. And so I did, because that was her request. And ultimately, I want to make everyone happy. But that was also a learning in itself, because I learned that we still need that little bit of organic information that comes through on its own, to really bring in that feeling of like, oh, this is magical, right? Because otherwise it might feel like just a question and answer session, where it's like, okay, say there's a question of, where do you see my marriage going? Or is this the right person for me? And then I tap in, I answer the question, but then, rather than let spirit just flow in with the direction they want to go in, whether it be around that question or whether it's something completely different, I trust and know that it will all weave together. But if we are simply just, going through a series of 20 questions, we kind of cut ourselves off from the flow of what potentially could have come in. And so after that experience, that client said, you know what, I preferred the first reading. So you were right? Like, just let's see what happens. That's not to say that you can't ask questions during the session. You absolutely can. But like, let's spend, at least half of the reading, or, say it's an hour session, let's spend like 45 minutes with what comes in. Let spirit surprise you. Let spirit gift you what it is that you need to know and hear. Knowing, like, the example of the other person I shared, how she had messaged me afterwards, after her session, after she listened back to the recording, she's like, wow, like, there were so many things that I missed that make total sense in this moment. And it's just like, this reading is continuing to gift me healing even after it has been completed. And that's the magic, right? Like, that is my intention. I really and truly believe that the information that comes through from the spirit world, whether it is from your past life, whether it's from your own higher self in this lifetime, your spirit guides, whether it is from a past loved one in spirit. I believe truly that it is all divinely orchestrated, and it's divinely said in a specific order, in a specific way. And we just need to get to the place where we can let that flow in. And so what I wrote down on my paper here was, trusting the messages that come in for people through a reading, like going into a reading, I say it as a client, and just trusting whatever comes in is meant for me in that session. And I said, releasing expectations is really a metaphor for trust on life, your life's journey, right? And allowing the universe to continually surprise you and gift you information and gift you signs and synchronicities. Um, that's what it's all about. And that's why I very much have made it clear in my own work with my own clients, and hopefully here on this podcast, that I am doing this work because I truly believe it is a healing modality. It is not entertainment. Yeah, we can have fun. We can laugh. Love to laugh in a session with a client. Love to bring through lighthearted information and bring through joy, right? But if we look at it from a place of, this is not for healing, this is just for you to entertain me, right? And for me to sit over here kind of amused, right? That's really less of my intention. And I think that may be why there's some mental blocks around things like doing events and doing larger kind of group readings where I'm working with a large group of people. I don't mean in terms of doing demonstrations and stuff, but I always am a bit apprehensive. Like I feel like because I put my heart on a platter during every reading I do with a client, I feel protective of that heart, and I'm like, I put so much in, and I know the healing that can come of this because I've seen it time and time and time and time again. And I want every reading to be like that. But I also know to release my own expectations, all I can do is set my intentions and be open, right? And be that messenger, trusting, trusting. And that's just the metaphor of life, right? So yeah, all that to say, let's get into some spirit stories. So I'm going to share a personal one first. Not personal in the sense that it's mine. Sorry. I just mean it's a kind of sensitive one. I will do my best to not share any information that could be consciously, like obviously connected to any client in general. Because, I do respect my clients' confidentiality and privacy. But, I'm going to share just in general about a certain interaction I had with my client's loved one in spirit, and just how beautiful it was, and a lasting one of those messages that will stay with me, because I don't remember every session I've ever done. I mean, I think that might be impossible because there's been thousands, but there's certain pieces of evidence over the last 5 years that stand out. Like I think it's been basically ingrained into my memory, and maybe purposefully in some way, who knows? But okay, I'll go on to say I had a reading with somebody about, I want to say maybe a month ago, not more than 5 weeks ago. And as soon as I saw them on the screen, as soon as I felt their energy from the get-go, I could tell this person was deeply, deeply grieving. And, I shouldn't have to say anything. I could just feel it. She wasn't crying, she wasn't frowning. She didn't necessarily look sad in the moment, but I could just feel the grief kind of radiating off of her. And I'm often asked the question, how long should we wait to attempt to connect to a loved one in spirit? And my answer is always, it depends. I will tell you, based on my experience, I, as the medium, as I said, I set my intentions and I make sure that I'm in the best place mentally, emotionally, physically as I can be for my clients. That's how I show up. That's my responsibility. And, I also trust that spirit person, whether they have been passed away for a week or whether they have been passed away for 20 years, will show up when their loved one has come forward to me and set their intention to speak to them. You have to remember my experience with my own father. And when he was on life support, and hadn't even passed away yet, technically, I know in my heart of hearts that his spirit had left the building, so to speak, but his heart was still beating, right? Um, his lungs were still breathing, I'll bet, with the help of machines, but still, his body was still living. But his spirit had left his body. And the experience I had with that, he wasn't even passed yet. But it had only been, hours since the event in which he would have passed away before they got his heart beating again. So to me, it's not as dependent as like on me as a medium or on loved ones in spirit. It's more dependent on the client. It's more dependent on you. And if you feel ready to receive, if you feel like you're in a place where you are ready to do that. And that's a personal thing. And that's something I'm very clear about when somebody asks me that question. And I know they're asking me that question because they are looking to book a session and want to make sure that it's not too soon. And I always say, do you feel ready? Do you yourself feel ready for that experience? If the answer is yes, then we can do that. Um, yeah. So this person felt ready because they booked the session, but I also could feel the grief, the sadness of the loss. I could feel the anticipation and the expectations that this person had for the session because they were so desperately wanting to hear from a certain person. So this was a mediumship reading. So her intention in coming was to connect to somebody. But as you know, from listening to this podcast, and a big majority of you also have had readings with me, you will know that I don't want to know who you want to connect with beforehand. And so, I closed my eyes and I asked anyone who was around to come through. And the first soul that came through was not her intended person. And this is very often the case, right? We often have someone, I always say the greeter, right? Spirit makes me laugh a little bit. And the Spirit's like, and it's not to be rude or offensive, but Spirit's kind of said, we're always going to send in the greeter first, like the Walmart greeter. There's somebody that's going to come through to say hello. Hey, just wanted to pop in and get it going, get the ball rolling so that we're in a more because our vibration you got to think about it. Your vibration would raise naturally, if someone comes through, even if it's not initially the person you're most hoping to hear from, but your grandpa comes through or somebody else that you can recognize comes through and they're like, hey, darling, just wanted to come in and say hi, that's going to naturally kind of make you feel more confident in the connection. It's going to make you feel a little bit lighter and like, okay, like this might happen. This might work, right? That person I'm hoping for very likely might come in because this other person's coming in so clearly. So we had a little one in spirit come through. There was a energy of a soul that had not been born. And this little one was giving me information about how this was its mother, right? And that they had been through a pregnancy loss of some sort, and gave me information about like due date and the gender of the baby, or sorry, I should say the sex of the baby. And all of this kind of stuff came through, like how long ago it had been. And, his mother had been able to validate, like, yep, that has happened. And then I said, he keeps talking about someone being here, like his father. And, and I said, his father. I said, okay, I've got another male here. And I immediately felt this other male come in, young-ish, not a child, like a grown-up, right? Younger than me. And I said, oh my goodness. I said, your husband's in spirit. And she said, yes. And, I could feel the emotion that came through with that acknowledgement. And then, the floodgates opened in the sense that her husband just came through amazingly and gave so much beautiful evidence of things he's witnessed, of, personal things in their life and their past together. Um, and there's something that came in the moment. I've learned to trust that everything that comes in a reading is meant to be shared. I don't need to understand it. I don't need to have context. And I feel like if you are a developing medium, that's something that, you have to learn to understand. The messages aren't always going to come in with full understanding. Very often they do, right? Because spirit will lean in on our clairsentience. That is our sense of our clear seeing, right? Like we'll have enough feeling or a knowing about what this thing is about, but sometimes the information is just shown to us and we don't have context for it. But that doesn't mean that we don't share it. So we share it knowing that the person in front of us may not fully understand it in the moment or grasp what that means or make a connection, but we give it anyways. And so what came through that was kind of an example of this was I was being shown a ring. It looked like a wedding ring being hung around a necklace, like hanging off of a necklace. And I said, do you wear your husband's wedding ring around your neck? This might be a suggestion for you that he'd like you to do this. And she kind of just looked at me and went, shook her head, didn't give me any more information, just shook her head. So I left that. And then I said, okay, I'm seeing, he's talking about a tall boy dresser. And she's like, yeah, he has a tall boy dresser. And I said, there's stuff on top. There's like colognes and like deodorants and, little things like boxes and, just little things that we keep on our dressers. And she's like, yeah. And I said, okay, he's talking about that. He's showing me like you smelling his colognes and his aftershaves. He's showing me you opening the drawers and there's all his stuff is still in there. And she said, yeah, I haven't touched anything. All his stuff is still on his tall boy dresser and all his clothing is still in his drawers. And I said, okay, and then I left those things because I thought maybe that was just his message. Maybe this is encouragement for her to wear his wedding band around her neck. And maybe he's acknowledging that, he knows she hasn't touched anything on the dresser. She hasn't, gone through his clothing yet. And certainly he was trying to do that, but he was also trying to connect something else. And she didn't recognize it. And neither did I in that moment. And so, he brought up some other things like a specific toy. He kept showing me being gifted to like their youngest child because they had a child that was only a few weeks old at the time of his passing. He had been in the spirit world for about 8 or 9 months at this time. It hasn't even been a year yet since he's passed. So, hadn't been very long. So, we finished the session and I couldn't get it off my mind. I just kept thinking about her. I kept thinking about him. I thought, I don't know if that's because, I could see some sort of commonality between us or just at a human level of trying to grasp the enormity of losing a spouse with 3 young children at, a young age. Certainly I had a lot of empathy for that. And I just, like I said, couldn't get them off my mind really. And then a day or two later, I think it was 2 days later, she said, I have to share something with you. I'm flabbergasted. I'm in absolute shock and awe. And I cannot wait to tell you about what just happened. And I said, okay, tell me. So she was thinking about certain things that came through in the reading, and she was thinking about that ring message. Now, what she hadn't shared with me in the reading, like when she just had shook her head when I asked her, do you have his wedding ring? Because he'd like you to wear it on his necklace. She didn't acknowledge or, really go into that at all, just a shake of the head. So she said, I was thinking about that actually. And what I didn't share with you is that a few weeks after we got married, he lost his wedding ring and he couldn't find it. And so I shook my head because I didn't know where his wedding ring was. And he hadn't either. Like, we had torn the house apart and we didn't know where it was. And so he didn't wear a wedding ring for years. And I thought, okay, wow. And so she said, then I was thinking a little bit further and I was like, he brought up the tall boy dresser. He brought up the things inside and on top. I'm just going to go over there and look around. And she wasn't even necessarily thinking, I'm going to like look for the ring. She was just like, I'm just going to revisit his belongings and look around and, feel close to him that way. And she said, I opened up this little box and at the back of it was his wedding band. And she said, Amy, like, I could have just, collapsed. I couldn't believe it. And she said, I know that the information he was showing you, the reason he showed you the ring, and then the reason he showed you the tall boy dresser and talked about the things on top of it, was for us to connect. The ring is there. And it's amazing because when he was living, he didn't know where that ring was. It'd been years, they couldn't find it. But from spirit, he knew where the ring was. I'm getting goosebumps as I'm sharing this story. He knew where the ring was and he wanted her to find it so that she could wear it around her neck, which she told me she will from now on. So is that not like, I'm full, when I revisit that story and share it, I'm head to toe goosebumps. My arms, or hairs are standing up. That is the beauty of spirit communication. That is the healing that can come from having a reading with someone that you feel comfortable with. And and having a reading where you let the information flow. That's where the magic comes in, because she could have come to me and said, can you ask him if he knows where his wedding ring is? Like, say that was like a question she had and she asked me, and maybe he would have given that information point blank. But can you see how, like, if she just asked that in her mind and she was just like, I wonder where that is. Because our loved ones can hear those thoughts, right? When we've set our intention to ask them a question or convey something to them, that's when I would say spirits have thought away. You're inviting their energy to them. So you can talk to them, right? Like, this is an example of, you could ask him, hey, where is that? And maybe he shows you his dresser. Maybe he shows you his things. And that's an invitation for you to look there. Right? So yeah, the magic is allowing that information to come in organically, right? Like, that's where it really comes in when somebody goes, I didn't ask you. Because I think somebody would be happy if they asked me the question and I said, I think it's here, and then it's there. And that's happened a few times where somebody's like, I can't find my dad's such and such. And then I get an image of kind of in a general area of where it is, and then they find it. Certainly that's magical. But like, if you're not thinking that, or if you think that and you don't say it, and then he offers the information, there's just another layer of magic, right? It's just another layer of like, oh my God, it's really him. It's really him. It's really him telling me that. The toy that he was showing me, the color and what it was and all that kind of stuff. She said when the session finished, she went to the door and there had been an Amazon delivery from one of his family members had sent the exact toy, the exact color that he showed me, had sent a toy for their child's first birthday, which was coming up soon. So that was magical too. And these are just examples. Had to do goosebumps as I'm talking again. These are just examples of spirit communication and how flipping amazing it can be, and how amazing it is. Yeah. And it's it's so symbolic of life. We can have a plan and we can be prepared and ask those questions. But I think in hindsight, if we're looking back at our life, and when we get to the end and we look back, it's those like moments that we don't expect that are just so magical, right? It's just the invitation. What I hear in this moment, it's like I was seeing like the aerial view of two people in a car, like a convertible. And it's kind of like, hey, move over. I'm your co-pilot, right? Or, hey, you get in the passenger side today and let me drive, right? It's this invitation from your loved ones in spirit, from your spirit guides, from the spirit realm to, co-create here. You you live your life, you make your choices, right? But don't forget about the magical support, the divine support that exists and is around you, right? Ultimately, it's you taking those actions. You have free will here. It's you doing the thing. But don't you for a second think that there's not divine support. There's not a whole slew of cheerleaders behind you. Speaking of which, in that moment, there's a photo behind me. For those of you on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. I'm pointing to it right behind my shoulder. And as I brought up the cheerleaders behind you, my eyes were drawn to that photo. So this is a photo of myself. It is like a creative creation that someone made for me. They had a picture of me, and they are they're an artist, like a graphic designer, an artist and creative person, and they just kind of felt into the energy of me and then added elements to the photo and changed colors. So in this picture, I've got a third eye literally on my forehead. The color of my hair here, there's like pink and teal, a turquoise in there, which is super interesting. Because recently, I always knew myself that I have blue in my aura and I have indigo in my aura, and I know those because I can see them in my aura. And I've also had other readers tell me that I have blue and indigo in my aura. But the other day I was talking to somebody about auras, and then I went on a website called, I can't remember what the website is, but the creator is called Mystic Michaela. Many of you might have heard of Mystic Michaela before. She is like a professional aura reader. And so I was just like, just for craps and giggles, I'm going to do this little, like, what's your aura quiz. And I got 2 results, and they were indigo and turquoise. And turquoise hasn't shown up for me before, but I'm just wrapping my head around the fact that I've got turquoise hair in that picture. Anyways, all that to say, like I said, if you are on YouTube, you can see this picture. There's white swirling energy all around me in that picture that she added. And then behind that, there's these little yellowy gold shaped, I don't know how to describe them, beings, but they're not like in a human shape. They're just I'm trying to think, picture balloons. Okay. Just for lack of a better word, long, skinny balloons. There's a bunch of those behind me, and they are like a yellowy gold color. And so when she presented me with this art, she told me a little bit about a process and how all that came to her. And she said, I've done hundreds of these. I've never before sensed other spiritual beings behind someone. And she said, so those yellowy gold beings that are behind you are other spiritual entities and beings that came forward and stood behind you, like ancestors and spirit guides and archangels, and divine masters. And she's like, I was a bit freaked out because I was kind of like, what is happening? What is this? And she said, that's what those are. That's what those are behind you. And she said, I just want you to know you're divinely supported. And I want you to know we all are. We all are. It reminds me of that meme. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's this photo of like a bunch of women kind of standing back to back to back to back. And the first person is labeled like me. And then behind that, it says higher self. Behind that, it says ancestors. Behind that, it says spirit guides. Behind that, it says divine masters, and it's just this representation of all those who stand behind you and with you. And that reminds me of that. But yeah, we have this huge spiritual support team behind us. And this is your little reminder that you do. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you again very soon. Sending lots of love to you all. If you have enjoyed this episode, please consider hopping on over to wherever you listen to your podcast and giving it a 5-star review. Thank you so much in advance. If you'd like to keep in touch, please head over to my website, theintuitiverising.com, to keep up with all the things that I have been doing. I also have a private Facebook community for people just like you. It's called the Intuitive Rising Community. All you gotta do is request to join, and I will let you in. Keep rising.